Let's talk more now about those negotiations and Iran's increasing role in the volatile Middle East. Here with me to discuss all of this is California Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff. He is the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. And so you really have the message from the White House here that getting no deal might actually be better than getting a bad deal. Just moments ago, White House spokesman Josh Earnest said the U.S. is prepared to walk away if necessary. Can the U.S. really walk away? Because we're hearing this from the U.S. side of things, but Iran and Russia are much more optimistic about a deal.
Well, we can walk away, and we would have to walk away if we don't get a good deal. It's going to be very important, I think, for the President to come back to Congress to be able to sell this, to point to some concrete things that have been delivered in terms of being able to snap back those sanctions you were just talking about. It's going to be very important because otherwise it could take months or years to try to establish the same kind of economic stranglehold on Iran if necessary. It's also going to be important that inspectors have unfettered access, not just to the sites we know about, but to other sites that Iran may begin clandestine efforts.
Because it has been years in the making of getting Iran economically to a point where the U.S. would argue it doesn't have a choice but to come to the table and try to get relief from some of these sanctions. We heard Elise speaking there about the possibility that the sanctions could go away. Iran gets what it wants. If it were to violate this agreement, Russia stands in the way of putting those sanctions back in place at the UN level. And then the U.S. could have been played for a fool, right?
Well, it could happen, and Russia certainly wants to have that kind of leverage over the United States, over the other European powers, that it would get by having a veto again in the Security Council to new Iranian sanctions. You can imagine how that would factor in, for example, if we were having the same fight over Ukraine 3 years from now when Iran is cheating, and we're dependent on Russia to reinstate sanctions. That's a problem, obviously, we really need to avoid. So it's tough, but you can see a scenario very well playing out in the future where the United States and our European partners very much suspect that Iran is cheating. We have evidence that Iran is cheating, but then going back into the United Nations to get those sanctions again would be very tough.
Okay, so let's talk about Iran in terms of some of the leverage that it has. In Iraq, big news today, you see that Iraqi forces were able to retake Tikrit, but only with the help, and they wouldn't have been able to do it without the help of these Shiite militias that are Iran-backed. Is Iran feeling emboldened here that since the lesson that we've learned from this situation with Tikrit is that Iraqi forces aren't strong enough without these Iranian-backed militias? Is Iran feeling like, hey, you know, we can throw our weight around, we're needed here?
Well, I think Iran is feeling very emboldened by several things, by the fact that you have this Shia rebel takeover of Yemen, that you've got a very close relationship with their arch former enemy, Iraq, where they can control a lot of the Iraqi defense services. In Tikrit, it's more of a mixed bag because the militias had to pull back in order for American airstrikes to come in. Soleimani, this al-Quds leader, had to leave the area. And that was really, I think, a loss of respect and face for Iran. So I think a mixed picture in Tikrit. But I think it's going to be very important for the United States to continue to insist that these militias not play an outsized role in the taking back of Sunni towns, because they could win the battle but lose the war if other Sunnis feel that they're endangered by these militias.
There could be some reprisals. Talk to us briefly about Congress's role here and what you want to see in terms of Congress's involvement when it comes to sanctions and these Iran nuclear talks.
Well, I've been keeping an open mind about a deal, whether it's good or bad. I think it makes sense to see if we, in fact, have one, because sanctions will pass in a heartbeat if we don't. If Iran either reneges, walks away, I will support them. There will be overwhelming bipartisan support for a new round of sanctions. The question is, where will that leave us? And I think this is what makes these negotiations so vexing. It's not like we're choosing between having a great deal or a poor deal. We're choosing between having what I hope will be a good deal or Iran going back to spinning up its centrifuges, back to enriching uranium, coming close to a red line, and then having a discussion with our Israeli allies. Are they getting close to your red line, and how far are they from our own red line? So we have to, choose between those alternate futures, and no one has a crystal ball here.
And we're talking about U.S. sanctions, a slice of the pie, really, when you talk about all of the sanctions on Iran at this point. Congressman Schiff, thanks so much. Really appreciate you being with us. And coming up,